us, for those that went with us into the break. If you're just joining us, welcome on board. You're watching Morning at NTV, and you find us at the Kickstarter segment, where we hold discussions on topical issues and what is trending and affecting the population. Today, we are talking school fees across board in Uganda's education system in light of the latest tensions on the raising or failure to cap fees by the government. The private sector is on the spot, especially when it comes to the plethora of private schools that can charge any fees at any one time as they wish. There are those that are saying that the economic circumstances at the time are hard, and some of the players within the education sector ought to be considerate in coming up with some of these caps. Last week, the Minister of State for Sports, that is within the line of education, Peter Ogwang, presented to Parliament a statement that seemed inclined on the fact that that will not be happening, as government will ensure that some of the changes are done in line with what is stated. But in a country where we have seen rollout of policies and implementation of some of the statutes is close to, well, never happening. Will that happen, or will the oversight role be played as efficiently as it ought to be played? I have with me the spokesperson from the Ministry of Education, Dennis Mugimba, joining us this morning. A very warm welcome to the program, Mr. Mugimba.
Thank you, Chris.
Also joining us is usual suspect in the education sector, a star player when it comes to industrial action, the Secretary General of the Uganda National Teachers Union, UNATU, Filbert Baguma.
Thank you, and good morning, viewers.
How are we doing?
We are faring in the current situation. Yes.
All right. We have the official from the Ministry of Education. In light of the latest tensions on school fees, let me allow you give us a clear picture of what is causing the tensions right now.
Thank you, Chris. The season we are going through is a perennial one. We always get these outcries every time we are beginning a term. And the outcry becomes louder at the beginning of every academic year.
Yeah.
And we hear the largest crowds crying out in the basic and secondary education subsector, because that's where we have 10 million learners. The charges are also high in tertiary institutions, but the proportions of learners and households affected are smaller, but there is also an outcry in that segment.
Yeah, that space, yeah.
Now, it is not new. It's something that has been in the sector. It's a historical issue. But the trends of school fees increments that are so painful began about 10 years ago or so, 15 to 10 years ago. So what happened is that schools, both public and private, began charging exorbitantly. Number one, they began charging for items which parents felt, you should not be charging me for this. For example, why should you charge me to construct a road going to the foundation body proprietor's home? Why should you be charging me for charges to clear a loan which the school incurred before my child even enrolled in that school? Yeah. Why should you be charging me for health insurance for teachers? I'm talking now of public schools.
That is right.
Now, what we also need to understand about our sector is that we are having two players playing by two different sets of rules. You have the public schools, which are heavily subsidized by the state in terms of inputs. The state meets the payroll 100%, development costs. But then you have the private player whose set of rules is different. They're incurring taxes, they don't have the subsidies from the state, etc. So you have to understand that dynamic. About 2020-21, during the campaign season, as the president hit the campaign road, he had people say that parents can actually afford to pay fees, but they are pretending not to. therefore UPE and universal secondary education are not necessary. That is what they told him. So, you know,
I hope the president knows that some people can speak unguardedly.
So, you know, he listens. So he said, okay, let me subject this to an inquiry to really find out, is it true that people cannot afford, can really afford, and they are pretending? So when the new term cabinet was signed, sworn in, the new Minister of Education, First Lady Janet Museveni, contacted friends of our country, the Norwegian Embassy in Uganda, to conduct a study to find out, one, what are the nature of charges in public schools? How are these charges collected? Who decides on these charges? What are the disparities between rural and urban schools? And if the parents were to afford, what would that amount be? Now, this study came out, it was conducted in the 15 sub-regions around the country, and the findings could not have been any stark. Chris, the reality is, in this country, if you do not control school charges, you will exacerbate dropout from schools. The population will not access education services, and especially in public schools, because the public schools are supposed to be the affordable ones. Now, when you even find that these charges are in schools implementing the universal education programs of the state, that is more alarming.
And it's an indictment on the state and the Minister of Education. I'll be asking you very shortly, I'm afraid I'm going to have to interject at this point. I'm going to be asking you very shortly on why that is so, including the fact that some of the prominent government schools that enjoy the subsidies continue to charge exorbitantly, and no one even lays a hand on them. Let me come to the Secretary General of the UNATU. You understand these challenges in the education sector more than anyone else, perhaps. Right now, the existing framework on the cost of education in the country has a guiding charter, doesn't it? Or we are simply operating as you come, if you're able to put up a building or two, and then bring a few people together as teachers and handlers, you begin the school.
We have minimum standards which you are supposed to have in place in order to begin a school.
Could you state those for us?
But that is not what is being followed. Unfortunately.
Before we know what is being followed and what's not, what are those minimum standards?
First of all, you must have qualified teachers. They must be qualified and registered teachers. For you to begin a school, you must have the infrastructure. They must look at, there must be health inspection. Is this place fit for the learning, teaching and learning process? So you must have teachers who are qualified and registered. You must have infrastructure. You must have furniture. Not only having a room and you don't have furniture and you say, I'm going to begin a school. Now, you must have facilities, sanitary facilities, because you cannot bring children in an area where you don't have sanitary facilities. Where will the boys go? Where will the girls go? So, having put in place some of those initial requirements, then they give you some time, some 2 years, to make sure that you mobilize other resources and then get registered. But they give you a license for some 2 years to fix all other things. Now, what is the situation?
Essentially, it means somebody begins to offer the service of education without a license.
With a license, and then registration comes in later.
Am I just a layman? Or?
What do you mean?
You begin, you want to set up a school.
Yes.
And then you are given a license.
Yes.
And then you register later.
you register later, having put in place everything that is required.
That's Uganda.
So you have some grace period which you are given in order to put all the requirements in place. Now the process is hijacked along the way because it depends on who is starting a school. If I am a councillor, if I am a member of parliament, now who are you as an inspector to come and ask me why I have not put this in place, and yet you have control over me in terms of my job security? So that's why if you go to the countryside, even here in Kampala city, you will find a school operating in formerly a shop, a commercial building which was a shop turned into a school. You will go to
from a homestead,
a former residential house turned into a school. Now, those have made life difficult for the implementation of the minimum standards. Now, you can close a school in the morning. By lunchtime, it is operating. And they will tell you, order from above.
We are glad we have one of the above here with us.
One of the above.
Listening to Filbert Baguma
Yes.
give the state of affairs.
Yes.
And we have a Ministry of Education that is fully fledged in the country to monitor and basically inspect. And all these anomalies are going on in the glaring eye of the Ministry of Education. So above, tell us.
Chris, you know, above is not alone. Actually, the way government systems work, there are different body parts part of one body.
Okay.
So the hand, the feet, the eyes, the ears, the nose, they are all parts of the body. But for the body to function very well, each of those parts has to play its role.
Its role.
Now, in a coordinated manner, the way the services are delivered in the arrangement we have in this country is that the Ministry of Education, which is a stone throw away from here, the headquarters,
no doubt,
they provide policy oversight. They also provide supervision for a limited number of institutions. But, for example, all the pre-primary schools and all the primary schools, they are under the jurisdiction for supervision by the local governments. Now, the local governments are under the Ministry of Local Government, but we do coordinate. So we get all these reports. And what Mr. Filbert is saying is actually true. These inspectors go there, they come up with a report, you go and close the school. The following day, a week after, the same school is operating with the same shortcomings that led to its closure. Now, remember, in that local government, you have the RDC, you have the police force, you have the whole infrastructure. So when things are not working well, it is not just a Ministry of Education has not worked well. We need to ask ourselves, which other of the body parts needs to get up, to step up to the plate and play its role? Now, it is those reasons that you end up finding that even the outcry for higher charges are sometimes in institutions which are unlicensed, unregistered. Some of them you can't even trace them. We've seen it during UNEB, PLE exams, UCE exams, USCE. You register a child and then the child does not have the school to sit from. So there is a lot that needs to be fixed. The Minister of Education, good enough, we receive all this feedback, we present it to the different parts of the state to see how can we put this right. Now, for the government institutions, it's a different case because by the time we come in, we ensure that there is minimum infrastructure. Now, we have had challenges that have contributed to increase of school fees in the institutions that are implementing university education programs. And one of them is what Filbert alluded to, insufficient quantities of teachers. So right now, when the minister said we study further the issue of charges in schools, to establish a unit cost that will eliminate demand for additional charges on a parent. We found that the biggest cost driver for extra charges in public schools that are implementing university education programs is teachers. So beginning next financial year, July 2024-25, the government has committed to get 309 billion shillings to improve the funding of universal primary education.
We have
for
money.
The start. It is going to be found, Chris.
We have money. When you hear these figures being thrown about, and then you juxtapose that with the challenges that we face as a nation, you begin to wonder where the fundamental disconnect is. Filbert Baguma, you understand the workings of the private sector, education sector, pretty much very well. Just take us through the decision-making process when it comes to deciding how much fees a school is going to place on a particular class or section, either or A level, how it comes to the conclusion that after this exorbitant fee has been paid as tuition, we need these other charges to be able to take care of whatever we do. If it is a boardroom setting, take us through what happens. Is it the headmaster who comes? Is it the proprietor who says, I think I've injected too much money in this institution, I need to recoup it, so make sure that this money is what you call for as fees? How does it happen? Do they call the Minister of Education at any one point and ask, here is what we are going to do? Are we within the framework that you have established? Or does the Minister of Education call and ask, can we have a look at what you're going to roll out?
Now, I need to be guided. Do I give you the idea or what is happening?
Your national television. That decision is yours.
Yes.
That decision is yours.
First of all, the practice is we don't have a unit cost of educating a child or a learner at any level in this country. Right now, as we talk, it's not in the public domain that if you are going to educate a child in a pre-primary, in a baby class, you need this amount of money. If you have to educate a child in primary, this is the money you need. If you have to educate your son or daughter at post-primary, secondary school, tertiary, and university, this is what you need. Now, in the absence of that, it depends on the players in the field. Now, if you go to the private sector, it is the owner of the school who determines what to be paid. And then it is brought through the structures as a formality.
Okay.
Because, first of all, if you are parents in a given private institution, what role do you have to determine what I should charge in my own institution? So they will sit, they will invite the PT executive, it will sit, it will send the issues to the board of governors, then subsequently the parents' general meeting will be invited. But what is it that they are receiving and where is the origin? Even when you are a head teacher in a privately owned institution, then you cannot stand to say this is high for the parents. The one who invests, who injects in the money, is the one who has the final decision. And when it comes to whether they communicate to the ministry of what they are going to do or not, the above will tell us. But what I know, that communication is not there. Now, this makes the whole process complex. Because first of all, education is a right to children. Now, the duty of educating citizens lies in the hands of government and the parents. So it's government's responsibility, together with the parents, to educate the children. That makes education, investment in education by private players, to get to know that education is not like any other commodity which you go to the market and buy. It is not an investment where you go and you say, I have injected this money, I must recoup it in the next 1 year. Because it is a service which is offered. But the reverse here now is true. People invest in education simply because they are looking for profits. And that has made it very difficult for the parents and guardians to educate their children now in the current situation. And that's why now the ministry is coming in to say, hey, things are getting out of hand. But he has ably told you that
can say
for
that,
the last about 15 years, people have been doing whatever they want.
For the last 15 years,
yes,
there hasn't been concerted effort on the part of government. As education has shifted systematically from being a public good to a commercial product, the government is unable to deal with the commercial product that education has become, and because of the dynamics of capitalism, demand and supply takes over, and then the oversight role is negated.
Now, Chris, Filbert said something very important, that education, let me paraphrase that, education is a service or a business like no other. First of all, if you don't like cassava, you may eat sweet potato, you may eat yams, you may eat an alternative. But education service or education as a good or a service has no substitute. There's no substitute to health, there's no substitute to education, there's no substitute to water. These are social services you need.
That's right.
Now, when you have a service or a good that has limited substitutes or none, the state has an obligation to regulate how that service is offered, so that you protect the consumers. And that is the situation we are in. The Education Act of 2008, Section 3(2)(b), clearly gives the responsibility to the Minister of Education to regulate charges. Now, there has been a lacuna in provision of regulations to guide the levying of school fees. There has been, let me correct this, Chris.
Very quickly.
There's been a distortion thinking that regulation is about capping. Actually, it's not about capping fees.
Clarify.
Regulation is about putting in place rules by which, if you're to implement, levy fees, what is allowed, what is not allowed. But the issue of capping, you have to be very slow about capping, because as I told you, there are two players with two sets of rules. The private schools and institutions are not in the same category of rules of investment like the public schools. So you better be careful when you get to capping. But you can say, for example, when it comes to school charges, Cabinet passed a decision on March 17th that you should not be charging for loan repayment on a learner. You should not be charging a parent to pay for movable or permanent assets that are going to remain of the proprietor or founder of the school. So that is the framework of regulation, but it's not just on about you can't go beyond this, you can't go below.
All right, Mr. Dennis Mugimba, spokesperson at the Ministry of Education. I'm afraid I'm going to have to go for a short break, but when we return, this conversation will continue, including offering us an explanation why government schools that are heavily subsidized are charging some of the most exorbitant fees, especially within Wakiso and Kampala areas. Stay with us. I'll be right back. entirely dealt with within an hour, a day, or even a week. These are conversations that will continue in the days and the months to come as efforts get underway to ensure that there is realignment of the system to be a kind of system that works best for the population and the country at large. But for now, allow me transition into our Take Note segment. We are looking at the state of diabetes in the country. Now, there's a lot I've just learned before we came on air that so many people that have diabetes have no idea that they do, and the figure is staggering. 80% of you, including you that is watching, you have no idea that you may have diabetes. Well, in the studio, we have Dr. Josephine Birungi from the Medical Research Council, who is going to help us understand what is the state of affairs in terms of prevalence of this debilitating disease, but also what interventions are being put in place to ensure that it is arrested and managed for those that are grappling with it. A very warm welcome to the program, Dr. Josephine Birungi.
Thank you very much, and hello viewers.
I'll take you straight into it.
Yes.
What is the state of affairs when it comes to diabetes in the country today?
Thank you very much. Maybe just before the state of affairs, it would be nice just to say a second about MRC.
MRC, that is the Medical Research
The Medical
Council.
Research Council.
Please do.
Yes, this is a research unit in Uganda based in Entebbe that is basically aims to conduct high quality research to improve care and also to build research capacity in Uganda, working with the Ministry of Health and looking at three major areas: vaccines, viruses, and non-communicable diseases. So I would like to go back to your question, since we have very few minutes.
Yes.
Yeah.
What is the state of affairs when it comes to diabetes in the country today? I've already warned the people.
Yes, and that's a right warning.
Many are frightened. And
actually the 80 is actually 89% of people who have diabetes, according to WHO, do not know. So what happens is people are coming in late with complications. So what are the complications that people are coming in with is people come with kidney problems. So someone needs kidney dialysis. People are coming in with erectile dysfunction. For the men, people are coming in with a foot that is with an ulcer and they need to be amputated. So that is one which is of course detrimental to the costs of the family and even the country. Yeah. Yes, and it's increasing rapidly in Africa generally. It increases by 1 million every year. So that is the state.
You've talked about the symptoms, but if somebody were to understand what is diabetes, is it a deficiency of a particular ingredient or nutrient in the body or the system? What is diabetes?
Thank you. That's a very good question. I should have started with. So diabetes is a condition where you have a lot of blood sugar in your blood. Okay, you have a lot of sugar in your blood.
That's right.
And so you see, this sugar is supposed to be used by your cells. But then when you have diabetes, it's a condition where your cells are not getting that sugar. So it keeps floating around without entering the cells, either because you don't have enough insulin or your body is not producing insulin. Insulin is that hormone which helps the cells absorb that sugar. Okay. Yeah, so it is a condition, and the reason you may not have enough insulin is either your cells were damaged in the pancreas, because it's the pancreas that gives us this insulin. Okay. Or you have gained, you have resistance to insulin, which comes as a result of being overweight. Although we are seeing in
Let's
Uganda,
call it fat, being fat. Ugandans need to understand the things very clearly.
Okay.
When you say overweight, somebody might begin to talk about, you know me, I'm now thick. Tell them,
I'm looking
if
good.
You're fat and obese, the susceptibility for diabetes is high.
Yes, very high. And maybe just to say fat, how do you know that I'm fat? Usually we measure what we call body mass.
The body mass index.
Yeah, you take your weight, take your height, and then we are able to divine your weight and your height, and then we're able to establish your normal BMI. If it's normal, then still your weight is good. If it's abnormal, above 25, you start worrying that actually might be obese or overweight.
Who is most exposed to the risk of diabetes?
Good. So, one, we see that if you have a family history, you are at risk of diabetes. The older generation, 40 and above, although now we are even seeing it in young
40
people.
and above is now classified as older generation.
Life starts at 40. Yeah. So that's also another issue. So age, and of course, like I've said, weight. Weight, very key. So those are some of the factors where you're at risk. But we also see people who get certain diseases, certain drugs. So the key issue is actually, if you have any of those risk factors, you need to do regular checkups.
Regular checkups.
Yes.
Okay, in Uganda or within Wakiso and Kampala.
Yes.
How and where do I get the regular checkups?
Good.
Is it the conventional hospital?
Yes, any facility should be able, because this is a very simple test. The fasting blood sugar test. It's a point of care, a very small machine. It takes a very few minutes. And at MRC, we have done studies just to compare our simple test. That's the Ugandan recommended simple test. That's the fasting blood sugar using a glucometer. Comparing it with another, what we think is more sophisticated and better, what we call HbA1c, and we found that actually HbA1c that measures your blood sugar over the last 2 months, and we found that actually they compare. So our simple test, from at least the result, the study we did in MRC of fasting blood sugar, will actually give you some of those. I mean, will give you a clue where you fall, whether you're pre-diabetes or you're actually diabetic or you're normal.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Now, when it comes to management and treatment of diabetes, there are some complications and misconceptions and total misunderstandings.
Yes.
People could be grappling with other diseases, and diabetes is an extension. And then the manifestation of those symptoms of diabetes are complicated by the fact that there are other diseases that people are grappling with.
Yes.
How are scientists or medics, for that matter, dealing with this kind of thing that is happening? Yes,
actually, you bring up another state of affair, maybe issue that is coming up, that now people are living with more than one chronic condition, say diabetes, hypertension, HIV, and you find that if HIV can damage your nerves, and then you end up with maybe numb legs, what we call peripheral neuropathy, also your kidney.
Peripheral what?
Neuropathy, sorry, making numb, your feet become numb.
I need to ensure my people out there are following.
Okay, maybe should I put it this way, that numb feet, so that you're not able to sense. Then they say diabetes does the same, hypertension also does the same. So like you're saying, you rightly put it, that sometimes you don't know which condition is actually bringing it up. So that's why we encourage people to have that check. But what are we doing as researchers and as scientists and care providers? There's a recommendation that we integrate care for some of these common chronic conditions. So that's what we are doing at MRC. We have done a study recently that shows that actually when you integrate these conditions, for people with multiple conditions, they stay in care. They even improve, especially now people with HIV, their viral load is suppressed, their blood sugar is a bit at least improved, or blood pressure, and even it is cheaper for them, because right now many facilities, if you have diabetes, you have to come on Monday, maybe hypertension another day. So integrating this is what we are doing now, and we've shown it works, and we have worked with the Ministry of Health to see that they actually take it up and scale it up.
Okay, now we've heard about the different types and manifestations of diabetes. Others say, are they 5? Or that's a bit scary?
So I should say, if you're looking at the types, we should say majorly 4.
Majorly 4.
Where you have the type 1. That is usually what people say, which you have when you're young, and that's when I said your body is not producing any insulin. Then we have one where you have, because of your insulin.
When you're young?
Yeah, a child.
So a child
yes, children.
can have diabetes?
Yes. Children can have diabetes, and that's why you're saying if a child has, if you have family history, it is good to check.
That is mostly genetic.
Yes, yes, no, but it's good to check.
Okay.
And type 2 diabetes is where we said insulin resistance, and then we have diabetes in pregnancy.
Okay.
And then we have where you have been, say your pancreas was traumatized either because of an accident or it was surgery. Then you don't have that, so you end up with, or drugs, and then you end up with diabetes.
In 30 seconds, there was the Africa Climate Summit in Nairobi the other week.
Recently, yes.
On the sidelines of that iconic gathering, some sentiment rose that the incidence of diabetes is being heavily attributed to climate change. I know it's a complex topic to talk about, but is it so?
It's a complex topic to talk about, that's what I'm saying. But it's true that, like I've said, you said 30 seconds. You have you have very simple modifiable factors that we can look at, diet and physical activity. Now, when there is climate change, it becomes a challenge for one to exercise if it's hot, because the temperatures are looming. 2, you'll have food insecurity. We are encouraging people with diabetes to have to eat vegetables, and if you have climate change. And lastly, maybe I should talk about the disruption in services. If services are disrupted, then you who has diabetes, you're not able to access service. Just in a nutshell, but the two
Thank you very much.
Related.
It's complex, but we shall save the complexities for another day. Many thanks, Dr. Joseph Birungi from the Medical Research Council in Entebbe, there for the perspective and enlightening us on the spectre of diabetes in the country. That will do it for this edition of Morning at NTV. It's been a pleasure having your company. Many thanks to the team behind the scenes that ensures this is a smooth right from 6:30 to just about now. Goodbye. I'll see you tomorrow.